There are many marvelous one-line descriptions of the spiritual path. And you read Master's writings and Swami Kriyananda's writings and other great saints, you find so many. One of Master's statements that I find very interesting is, you must fight the battle of joy for joy right where you are standing. And we often imagine that somehow our spiritual life is based on something that we don't have access to right now. When, if, then. Swamiji also had this marvelous phrase, I loved it. Most people are always wishing for something else. Don't. Just, well, there you are. There's not much wiggle room on that one, is there? Just before service started, I went out into the courtyard, and the sun happened to be shining just where we were standing, and it just, on a slightly cool day in the end of the brutal California winter, that bright sunshine was so intoxicating. And just for a moment, standing there with it on your face, you just have this wonderful uplifted feeling. Well, standing there, I was remembering what Swamiji has written in many places. Everything in the material world is really just a symbol of the spiritual world. And this is among the many thoughts that you have to kind of turn your mind to get it around a thought like that, because this world seems really big. And just by definition, we squinch up inside ourselves to go to the interior world, so it seems smaller, doesn't it? So it's hard for us to appreciate that it's the energy universe, the spiritual universe that just comes down and condenses itself. So I was thinking how intoxicating that sunshine was, and how much more intoxicating the spiritual eye would be, the attractiveness of it, because we can relate to that feeling of just everything about it's attractive. And this thought that we have of fighting the battle for joy, it's a very powerful thought, and we have to understand it in the right way. Today our reading speaks about that no man can see the divine, but that the presence of the sun at the heart of everything, it's not written exactly like that in the Bible, but this is how Master explains it, that the presence of the divine sun at the heart of everything declares to us that divinity. And it makes obvious. It's not like it has a sign or a website declaring it for us. It declares it to our awareness. It just makes it clear. When I'm standing out there, just with my eyes closed and the sun on my face, I can feel its warmth. I can feel the attractiveness of that warmth. It declares itself to my experience. And then it's just a fact for me. So when we talk about in the Bible, where Jesus calls himself the Son of God, the only begotten of the divine, all the different ways that it's said, when Yogananda explains it from the yogic side, from the self-realization side, what we understand is that spirit is center everywhere, which is that pure reflection of spirit is at the heart of everything, including ourselves. What makes us animated, what makes us living, what makes us aspire, what makes us desire the experience of joy, of the sunlight on our closed eyes, whatever it might be, it is that spark of divinity which is always seeking to expand itself into the universe. Now, I was contemplating this recently, and some very interesting thoughts came to me about it, which I'm going to try to express in a way I hope that is helpful also to you. We all suffer. We all suffer. I think that's enough. That's probably it. We all suffer. Okay. We all suffer for a whole lot of different reasons, mostly because we are always longing for something else. We are having an experience and we wish we were having a different experience, don't we? And in fact, I was reading this phrase of Swamiji's that was very poignant to me when he was saying that whenever the divine, whenever Master corrects you, whenever the Guru corrects you, whenever someone who's really has your best interests at heart wants to help you understand something that maybe you don't understand yet, they'll do it in such a way that once you get the idea, you'll feel encouraged and able to go forward and achieve that. You know, I remember Swami Kriyananda many times, more times than I like to remember, had to redirect my energy for one reason or another. But he always worked very hard to help me understand that he believed that I could do it. And in fact, not only with me, but with everyone that he worked with, he would never tell you more than you could accept with courage. Because his intention was not to beat you down and then make you submit or prove to you how powerful he could be. He had only one intention, and that intention was to help you fight the battle for joy right where you were standing and win. And there's a sensitive line between being given something that you can actually step into and becoming so overwhelmed by what you're hearing that you just want to go home and pull the covers over your head. And Swamiji was saying that one of Satan's wonderful tricks, Satan being the personified vision of the force that pulls us away from light, is to make us feel discouraged, to lose hope. I mean, what is the worst that happens to us when we're struggling? It's not even so much the struggle itself, is that if we lose hope that we can ever succeed. If we begin to define ourselves as people who can't succeed. In fact, Master gives very interesting advice. He says, if you're faced with a test, a challenge to your well-being, that you know you can't win, he said, run away. It's very interesting. You seldom sort of get endorsement for your own desires like that. Just run away. Of course, sometimes you can't, but if you possibly can, run away. In fact, he says, the better part of wisdom is to run away. Because he said, you don't want to constantly put yourself in a situation where you will always be defeated. Because it will reinforce in your mind that you are a person who is always defeated. He said, fight the battles you can win. And then when you get the picture of yourself as a victor, then you can gradually circle back. I had a difficult karma to face once, and I suddenly found myself I didn't overcome it, it just went away. That was so great. And I said to Swami, look, it's just gone away. And he said, well, perhaps it's over. He said like that. And then he just let a beat or two pass. Well, I went, and then he said, but I don't think so. But he said, there's nothing more you can do at this point. Just put it on the shelf. He said, grow strong in other ways, and then you'll get to come back to it again. But because if we ever lose hope, what happens to us when we lose hope? We have no creative ideas anymore. We begin to ease the pain by closing down. Swamiji remarked how many people, as they get older and older, the pain of life has been too much, and so they gradually harden inside. You see them, they become rigid. They don't really accept even positive things so much anymore because it's all just too much. So we'll just brace ourselves against us. This is not victory. This is becoming a psychological antique, is what Master called it. And he said, and sometimes then God has no choice but just to kill you off and give you a new start. Because you're just not making progress anymore. You're just ossifying in place. People do that at the age of 14 sometimes. It's not necessarily age-related, but it's something we get into. So what we need above all, and this is why Swamiji put it that way, that it's Satan who makes you feel discouraged. Whenever you feel, I cannot cope, I can't go on, there is no hope. Swamiji said negative thinking is to believe that this problem has no solution. Positive thinking is to know there's always a way. May not be your first choice, your best desire, and it may not be painless, but there's always a way. But when we lose hope, it just can't go on. So even when that very thought comes into your mind, and Satan, the darkness, Swami says, it insinuates itself into our consciousness through our own false reasoning. It just persuades us that in this case, everyone has the spark of divinity inside of them, except for you or me. Everything happens for the good of all, for the will of God, except this. Now, coming back to the Son of God lives within us, Swamiji says, to believe in the Son of God, and usually that's associated with Jesus, but it's really to believe in the reality of divinity in every individual, or to believe even in the Son of God, is not to believe in an avatar particularly. It's actually to believe in yourself. To really believe in yourself, not believe in myself, which is I can do it, I can write the book, I can sing the song, I can open the business. It's not believing in that kind of self. It's to really believe that I am that spark of divinity. And that's why the masters so often, that's just all they tell us. They're not really interested in the complex psychology that we have as to why we don't believe it. They just want to break through and sweep all that aside so that we really will believe in ourselves, in our own intuitive perception of the infinite and the understanding that that infinite is mine. Now, this is what I was playing out in my mind, and I was saying this in another context just a couple of days ago, so forgive me for those who are hearing it a second time. There was a terrible movie that I watched once, and it was one of those movies, it was not so much badly done, it's just agonizingly done. It was a very long movie. The director thought that if some was good, more was better. And the theme of the movie was the last brave remnant of the Native Americans being ruthlessly and relentlessly hunted down by the evil white people for 3 hours. And so all that would happen would be there would be another conflagration and the little band would get smaller. And then there would be another one and they would get smaller. And then, it would get more and more winter and the food would get less. It just went on and on and on. And why I watched the whole thing, I don't know. But anyway, I did. But in there was the brave chieftain. And the brave chieftain, periodically through this whole story, the music would change and you would see this island floating on a river. And this was a vision that this chief had had since he was a youth. And he was always pondering the meaning of this vision. And then finally, about 2 hours and 45 minutes into the movie, they came on a river and he saw the island in physical life. And when he saw it, suddenly the meaning came to him. And the meaning of that island was that was the place he was going to die. And suddenly, as an old man, and he realized then his life was over, and we realized the movie was almost over, because he was going to die there. But then he thought back over his entire life, and because he was the dying remnant, he'd been in battle against the white people his whole life. And he said, if I had only understood that until I was on that island, nothing could stop me. You see, he said, what a brave warrior I would have been. No, isn't that I love that part. That was why I watched the movie. If I had only known that I was always safe until I was standing on that island, I would have risked everything. Now, bringing it back to where we are. To believe in the Son of God is to believe in yourself. Is to believe that I am, in fact, the divine. And that really, truthfully, in reality, no other experience, it can't touch me. Swamiji says in a certain place, he said, all that which seems so important to you now, he said, even in a few years, it will not have the same importance to you. And he said, and when you die and leave this world, if you remember it at all, he said, you will say, oh yeah, that. Oh yeah, that thing that happened. That huge tragedy that looms so large in my life. That overwhelming challenge that I just didn't really think I could face. Oh yeah, that. Because compared to our divinity. Compared to our divinity. Swamiji put it a different way once when he said, when you attain self-realization, he said, and you're standing at that, whatever that would be. He knows what that is. I don't know what that is. You're standing at that point of, well, the physical sun is just a tiny reflection of it. You're enveloped in that blaze of glory. He said, you look back at all your incarnations, and there are millions of them. And every one of them, while it happened, was as intensely real as this one. Just think how intensely real this is. Think how many desires and fears and fantastic fulfillments and glorious moments and moments of anguish and despair in just this little tiny one. And we don't even remember much of it. You know, much of it already is just kind of vague back there. Oh yeah, that. You see a photograph. Oh yeah, that. I remember that. And think of millions of them. But you do see them. Swami said you see them all. But you realize that in all those millions of experiences, the only thing, and this is hard to get your mind around, that ever really happened was when in the course of that you actually touched into divinity. And everything else was just a dream. A dream in the sense of it wasn't what it seemed. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen, that we didn't have the experience. When you have a dream at night, just by yourself in your subconscious mind, even if you're sleeping in a dormitory with 100 people, you're by yourself in your subconscious mind. And it really does happen. My goodness, sometimes they're really intense. I'm not talking about super conscious dreams where you leave this world altogether, but all the subconscious dreams, and sometimes even saintly figures wander around with you in your subconscious dreams. It really happens. You sometimes you dream past life experiences, or you dream your own samskars, you dream your own impressions, fears, disappointments, anxieties about something. I would have this dream, which thankfully I'm not having so much anymore, where I did something really stupid that just really blew my life up. And in the dream, the action would always be obscure, but the consequences were intense. And I was about to face the dissolution of a whole bunch of stuff because of my own stupid action. And it would just be such a drag in the dream, just so intense. And I would be so happy to wake up. So happy to wake up. So while I was in it, those experiences were real. There was no point in the subconscious dream when I could say this isn't happening. It was always happening. You're trying to take the test in high school and you haven't studied and you can't find the room. I mean, everybody goes through it. It really happens. And so does this life. And so did all those others. It appeared to us to have really happened. You see how it is in the dream? It appeared to us to have really happened. And because it appeared to us to have really happened, all the feelings that go with it also really happen. And this is what Swamiji says. From that point of view, of liberation from that fundamental delusion of our own separateness from the greater reality, our own egoic responsibility for what happens, our own incredible likes and dislikes and preferences, always wishing for something else. But then we suddenly see, oh, it was all a dream. The only thing that really happened is when I touched into divinity. Now, if we were that warrior who was always having to risk his life and knew that his life was absolutely safe because he wasn't standing on that island, think what a brave warrior he could have been. Now, in our reality, do you believe in the Son of God? Meaning, do you believe that I am one with that infinite? Do I really know that everything else that happens is just waves on the sea? And then, what a beautifully happy soul I would be. Isn't that so? Because what could ever take it away from me? Because I was talking about movies, let me come back to that for a moment. There was a man who lived here for many years, because I see Priya here, Karuna, a wonderful soul, a very dear man. And he had such a tender spirit that he just couldn't watch any movie in which people suffered. And we used to have a rating for movies, which is if it was K rated, that meant if it was Karuna rated, that meant that any of us could enjoy it. And Asha rated was a pretty tight standard, but Karuna rated was much, much more. He couldn't even watch Bambi because the mother was killed. It was just too much for him. He just couldn't bear it. So I'm not really great at movies that are tough or sad. And so I like to know that it's all going to come out okay. I like to know that nothing really sudden and scary is going to happen. So I don't have to sit there like that and just fear that the person I'm loving on the screen is suddenly going to get eaten by the blob or something like that. So then I can just relax. And I really have been in movies many times that I have been promised are either K-rated or A-rated. And therefore, even if it's making me nervous, I don't have to be nervous because I know that nothing really terrible is going to happen. That's very different for me than watching a movie where I don't know, which I don't go to a lot of movies because it's really terrible for me. But how much of this life are we always living with the great anxiety, whether conscious or subconscious? And subconscious is a lot because, well, not every incarnation before this one worked out so super either. That's why we're here. It's because there's been a lot of pain and disappointment and unfulfilled longings, regret. This is what Swamiji says binds us to the wheel of reincarnation. Two concepts, beautiful concepts to contemplate. Two things bind us to the wheel of incarnation. Longing for that which we never got. Regret over something that happened that we would like to be able to fix. And both of those, of course, are all based on the idea that this world is what it appears to be. And it's so darn convincing, isn't it? The pain that we feel. Swamiji commented about a certain woman who went through a serious emotional time in her life. And he commented, though, he said, all of her suffering was mind-made, he said. It was the perception that she had developed, and it was mostly mind-made in terms of how other people were responding to her. He said there was nothing actually tragic going on in her life, but she had suffered intensely because the orientation of her mind persuaded her that she had to suffer. That's very tricky, isn't it? Especially when you go forward into realities like death and realities like true, deep disappointment. I mean, we're all adults in the room here almost. We know this. Life is just not all that great a lot of the time. Sometimes it's just really splendid, but tough things happen. But if we believe in the Son of God, in us, if we believe that everything else is just a play of shadow and light over that fundamental power of the light, what brave warriors for the light we would be, wouldn't it? Isn't it so? And any whisper of discouragement can just be flicked aside in that belief. It's a very interesting, and at least I hope you find it so, I have a very powerful idea to contemplate. What am I afraid of? Why am I worried? I don't know, well, as Master also said, whenever you feel sad or discouraged, Satan has a hold of you. Meaning the power of darkness and ignorance has a hold of us. Because fighting the battle of joy right where we stand means simply to know I am a child of God. And yes, He may take me by the hand and lead me through some dark valleys, but it's always there. It is myself I believe in, myself as a child of God. There's that beautiful French saint who said so simply, if you knew how much God loves you, you would die for joy. I don't recommend dying right now, but dying for joy is not a bad idea. Just really always knowing that in anything that takes us away is mind-made suffering. And life challenges us enough. We don't have to find creative ways to make it worse, do we? Instead, let us do what God and Gurus have given us and fight the battle and win. God bless you.